Your false king is dead, bastard. He and all his hosts were smashed in 7 days of battle. I have his magic sword. Tell his red whore. Your false king's friends are dead, their heads upon the walls of Winterfell. Come see them, bastard. Your false king lied, and so did you. You told the world you burned the king beyond the wall. Instead, you sent him to Winterfell to steal my bride from me. I will have my bride back. If you want Mance Raider back, come and get him. I have him in a cage for all the North to see, proof of your lives. The cage is cold, but I made him a warm cloak from the skins of his 6 whores who came with him to Winterfell. I want my bride back. I want the false king's queen. I want this daughter and his red witch. I want this wildling princess. I want his little prince, the wildling babe. And I want my reek. Send them to me, bastard, and I will not trouble you or your black crows. Keep them from me, and I'll cut out your bastard's heart and eat it. Ramsey Bolton, Trueborn Lord of Winterfell. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nerdscape. My name is Michael, and today we're going to do a comprehensive deep dive into one of the big mysteries that we were left with at the end of A Dance with Dragons. Who wrote the Pink Letter? This mystery is one that seems to have its grip into the fandom, and there's a good reason behind that. For one, the Pink Letter is the direct reason that Jon decides to take the Wildlings and the Night's Watch volunteers to retaliate against Ramsey, which it seems that was the last straw that broke the camel's back that got Jon assassinated. This makes us invested as we love Jon, but also the Pink Letter has a lot of glaring problems that don't make a whole lot of sense when you think about them too much. However, these glaring issues do seem solvable, so it's like a carrot being dangled in front of us that we know that we can figure out. By that same token, though, the thing about A Song of Ice and Fire theories is we as a fandom have had over a decade to analyze every detail of these books. And as such, we sometimes will look into things a little bit too deeply, things that don't really need to be looked into. Could it be that the Pink Letter is one of these details? Well, let's get into it. When you're making a theory about the author of the Pink Letter, there are a number of criteria that has to be met. 1. The author has to have knowledge of Theon and Jane Poole's escape from Ramsey. 2. The author has to have knowledge of Mance and the Spearwives. 3. The author has to have knowledge that Selyse and Shireen are at the wall. 4. The author has to have knowledge about Val and the baby. 5. The author has to have knowledge about Melisandre and Lightbringer. 6. The author has to be ignorant or uncaring about using the title of princess and referring to Val. And 7, finally, the author has to assume Jon is in a position to return the people as stated in the letter. The primary candidate for the author of the Pink Letter is the person who signed it, Ramsey Bolton. Here, we can get into the noticeable problems with the Pink Letter as a whole that makes us, the audience, feel like something is not quite right. For one, Ramsey has a lot of information that he should not be able to know. Ramsey would know about Melisandre due to the fact that by the end of the Clash of Kings, it seems pretty common knowledge that Stannis was working with a Red Priestess, and the Pink Letter never names her by name. This does not explain, however, why Ramsey would know about Lightbringer, due to the fact Stannis can only light the sword with the help of Melisandre's magic, and it's not a commonly known fact. Ramsey has no reason to know about Val or the baby. Further, Ramsey shouldn't be able to reasonably assume that Queen Selyse and Princess Shireen are in Jon's custody. Now granted, Ramsey is famous for his proclivity at torture, so if he had gotten a hold of Stannis, or really any member of Stannis' guard, he could get the information from them, so we're going to let that one slide for the time being. Next, the problem is, how would Ramsey know about Mance and the Spearwives? In Theon 1 A Dance with Dragons, we know where each member of the crew is by the end of the chapter. Holly was dead explicitly, and you can probably infer that Frenya was probably dead by the end also, as she stayed back to hold off the men that were chasing them. However, Rowan, Willow, and Myrtle split off from the party to go rally with Mance. The problem here is all 4 of those people are very strong fighters, not to mention very dubious. It seems odd to me that they would get captured, especially if nobody was previously suspecting them, and double especially considering Ramsey was dealing with a lot since Stannis was potentially attacking and Jane and Theon were escaping. It seems like a lot for one morning, you know what I mean? Now, granted, they could have been captured after the supposed battle, but I don't see them sticking around long enough while Ramsey and Roose are preoccupied, and they have such a very easy escape opportunity since the battle was taking place. The most glaring problem with Ramsey knowing about the Spearwives is that Squirrel stayed up in Ramsey's bedchambers to double as Jane, and she had planned to escape the tower by climbing down, which she is known to be good at, hence her name Squirrel. We do have to do some guessing as to whether or not Ramsey would have gone up immediately to his bedchambers after it was confirmed that Jane and Theon escaped, which is possible, but also Stannis was right outside the gate, apparently, and I just don't think he would have had enough time to do so, especially if Roose was ordering him into battle preparation. This means that Squirrel had plenty of opportunity to escape. Therefore, there is no way for Ramsey to know that there were exactly 6 Spearwives. Next, it's odd for Ramsey to say that he wants Jane and Theon returned to him from Jon. The problem here is we know for a fact from both A Dance with Dragons and Theon's sample chapter from The Winds of Winter that Theon is with Stannis, and Ramsey would know about that if he defeated Stannis in battle, as the letter says. There are little more things in universe, such as the fact that Ramsey will typically write his letters in blood on a piece of skin for intimidation purposes, and the pink letter was not. Also, the pink seal that held the letter together was described as smeared, which raises into question both the authenticity and if somebody else had opened the letter before Jon. Thematically, it also makes little sense for Stannis to be dead at this point in the story. He is the last king standing in the War of the Five Kings, and his story has so much depth and importance. He is a mentor figure to Jon, our main character, not to mention a major political piece in that he's rallying the Northmen, as well as the only person attempting to take the North back by martial means. It just doesn't make sense for him to die off screen. We also have to put in perspective that Stannis still needs to burn Shireen, which will be the final needle in Stannis' pincushion that will lead to his defeat. So, with all that being said, could it be Ramsey? Well, there is certainly evidence that it could be. Nearly all the points I just made can be explained away. Plus, it is entirely possible that Ramsey was bluffing, or he's operating under information that's wrong. For example, if Ramsey didn't participate in the battle and stayed behind to clean up the mess after Theon and Jane escaped, it could be that Stannis had used a battle strategy that made it look like he lost in order to get access to the very defensible Winterfell, making Ramsey think that Stannis is actually dead. But let's operate under that it's not Ramsey for a little bit. But if not Ramsey, who? Well, there's a myriad of possibilities. For example, Stannis. The evidence for Stannis is a theory that Stannis might have felt outmatched by the Bolton forces and was trying to get Jon to march south, which would result in Stannis having backup arrive should he need it. This also solves a lot of problems, since Stannis would know about Theon and Jane escaping, as well as information about Val, the baby, Selyse, and Shireen, and it's never explicitly said one way or the other if Stannis knows about Mance being alive and the mission to go save Jane, but it is a possible one. Also, in the earlier Jon chapters, Stannis wants Jon to take a position as the Lord of Winterfell, and Jon refuses. But getting Jon away from Castle Black and into Winterfell could persuade him potentially. Also, Jon had to teach Stannis not to call Val Princess, so adding the princess line could be Stannis trying to actively lead suspicion away from himself. But it's not Stannis, in my opinion. For one, it's very much out of Stannis' character to do this kind of plan, and he respects Jon's decision to stay with the Night's Watch, even if it raises a big political problem for him. Further, Stannis seems to have a plan to defeat the Boltons, and Stannis is one of the best military leaders in the series, so him being confident in a plan leads me to have faith in him. But next up as a possibility is Mance. Mance actually does make some sense. In character, a big reason to go Jon south is Jon would bring the wildlings with him and get them further south away from the White Walkers, as well as giving him an army that would betray Jon and obey his orders if necessary. Further, the letter uses phrases common to wildling language, such as false king and black crows. But there are some issues with the Mance theory also. For one, captured or not, Mance is not really in any kind of position to send a letter. He also doesn't know that Tormund and his large host of wildlings are at the wall since they arrived after Mance left. So the idea that Mance would be able to have a giant plot to bring an army south just doesn't fit. Finally, Mance would know not to call Val a princess. Although, in fairness, if he was pretending to be Ramsey, he might purposely add this to throw Jon off. Still, though, I feel like that's reaching when you add it with the other points. Next, there is Wyman Manderly, who is a very interesting candidate. He does actually have a lot of good reason to bait Jon South. For one, if he framed Ramsey for giving a death threat to the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, it would give Jon both a valid reason to retaliate, but also the majority of the Northern Lords have massive respect for the Watch, putting more strain on the Bolton's hold of the North politically. Also, Wyman's plan currently is sending Davos to retrieve Rickon Stark so the North can have a Stark to rally behind. A good backup plan to this would be to bring the bastard son of Ned Stark south, where he could be a major political symbol. Jon also had to explain to Stannis that Val is not a princess, due to the fact that wildling line of succession is not the same as feudal Westeros, meaning that a normal lord such as Wyman would not understand that concept. Wyman had Davos in captivity, who could have explained that Val, the baby, Shireen, and Selyse were all at the Wall. He also knows that Reek is Theon, and he thinks that Jane is Arya, meaning the most likely rationale is that they would have fled to Jon at the Wall. Finally, if Ramsey did manage to capture Mance and the Spearwives, Wyman would know about them due to the fact that he is at Winterfell currently. The evidence for Wyman is pretty deep, and honestly, if you want to believe that theory, I can't fault you. The only major points against him is, despite all the implicit ideas that can point to him, there is no direct evidence to support it. Also, I personally just think that Wyman has a lot of plots going on in his collaboration with the other Northern Lords and what is known as the Grand Northern Conspiracy, and also attempting to get Rickon back to the North. It seems like he has too many pies, not enough fingers, if you know what I mean. Also, Wyman, like most Northern Lords, knows that the Night's Watch is in a pretty weak state and has no idea about the wildling host, so having Jon ride south could potentially be a death sentence, which would not be beneficial to Wyman. So, with me poking holes in all of these theories, who do I think wrote the pink letter? Well, I think it was a person that was in plain sight. A person who has means, knowledge, motive, and opportunity, as well as somebody that would fall under the radar but makes perfect sense when you do some digging into our story. I think that it was Mully. Wait, who the hell is Mully? Well, Mully, if you don't know, is a steward at the Wall. Mully is present for pretty much every major event that happens in the Jon storyline in A Dance with Dragons. For example, he's present for the announcement that there were Night's Watch brothers who were killed by the Reaper. He was present for Alice Karstark's wedding, the arrival of Tormund, the arrival of the Wildling refugees, as well as pretty much every other major event. So why do I put my eggs in this basket? Well, to be clear, I don't think Mully wrote the pink letter independently. Mully was clearly in on the conspiracy to assassinate Jon, as evident by the fact that Ghost snaps at him, and as such, Mully was probably ordered to write the pink letter by Bowen Marsh, the senior member, to our knowledge, in the conspiracy. There are a lot of questions for this, though. For one, why? Well, the conspiracy to murder Jon was not a crime of passion or a crime of opportunity. Throughout the book, there are numerous grievances that Jon faces from his men that all compound together that get him assassinated. To list a couple of these grievances, we have a lack of food at the Wall, and then Jon inviting more mouths to feed, Melisandre just being generally unpleasant and also disavowing all other religions, many of which are held by members of the Night's Watch, working and aligning the Night's Watch, or at least giving the perception of, with Stannis, opening the gates and also gifting lands to wildling refugees, as well as a whole list of other things. You see, Jon's entire plot is written, in part, to show Jon was trying to do the right thing, but failing in leading the Night's Watch appropriately. So, with all of those motives written up and compounded, it's safe to say that the conspiracy wasn't created just off a whim, but rather this suggests that the murder was weeks in the making. Especially because Melisandre says that she sees daggers in the dark coming for Jon and her flames, meaning the plot was in the works for a while. But the fact remains that the biggest hurdle the conspirators would face after the assassination is that they would be marked as traitors and then executed, irregardless of how many reasons they had. This is because none of the grievances that they have directly break the Night's Watch oaths. In light of this, the conspirators would need a public reason to stage a legal coup to avoid their heads being Ned Stark. The Night's Watch takes no part in the affairs of the realm is a commonly quoted saying that many of the Night's Watch lives by, but it is not an official part of their oath. However, it's such a commonly said component of the Night's Watch, it can basically be an implied portion of it. So, if the Lord Commander broke this, or any other section of the oath, the Night's Watch could reasonably execute the Lord Commander without fear of retaliation. But Nerdscape, I hear you asking in the comments section, you clearly set up that the author of the Pink Letter has to have these listed points, or it just doesn't make sense. Well, every member of the Night's Watch was present for Stannis lighting Lightbringer, and was also knowledgeable about the existence of Mel, Val, the baby, Selyse, and Shireen. But the biggest problem that you have in this theory is the existence of Theon, Jane, Mance, and the Spirit Wives. How in the world could the conspirators have known about these components? And to that I have to point you towards Tycho Nestoris. For those of you who forgot, Tycho arrived at the Wall to negotiate with Stannis about the Iron Bank backing his cause, then went south to talk to Stannis in person, which he does do. In The Sacrifice of Dance with Dragons, it's seen that Tycho is actually a member of the party, along with Mor's Umber, that runs into Theon and Jane after their escape. Then, Theon, Jane, Tytos, and company return to Stannis. So Tytos clearly knows about Theon and the perceived Arya, who is actually just Jane Poole. And is it so unlikely that he doesn't know about Mance and the Spear Wives? Theon probably would have had to tell Mors and Tytos the situation, considering the fact that Stannis' army was probably just going to execute them on the spot. Also, in Theon 1, the Winds of Winter sample chapter, we see Stannis order Tytos, Jane, and an escort back to the Wall, and then back to Braavos. It is entirely likely that Tytos, or a member of the party, such as maybe Jess and Massey, would write a letter ahead to the Wall to explain their arrival, and also to prepare the ships at Eastwatch so Tytos can return to Braavos. We also get the big points made by Barbie Dustin that Maesters cannot be trusted, and since Maester Aemon is absent, Clytus is the acting Maester at the Wall. I also think it's very likely that Clytus is in on the conspiracy due to the fact he seems to be acting during his delivery of the Pink Letter. He acts very scared of the letter despite the fact that it's seemingly been unread. So let's put all of this together. Bowen Marsh, Wick Whittlestick, Mully, and potentially Clytus. By the way, there are 4 confirmed members of the conspiracy who killed Jon, so that number fits. All have grievances with their Lord Commander, which have all compounded them into deciding that they need to kill him to save their organization. However, they can't do so without facing execution themselves, since they have no truly justified reason in doing so. Then a letter arrives at the Wall from Tytos, or a member of Tytos' party, that explains that they will be arriving with Jon's quote-unquote sister, in doing so explaining Theon, Jane, Mance, and the Spear Wives. Clytus opens the letter, reads it, and relays the information to Bowen Marsh, the lead conspirator. They sit on this information until Jon announces the mission to Hearthome, which is the point that they decide to put their plan into action. Using Mully to write the letter, due to the fact that Jon would recognize Wick's, Clytus, and Marsh's handwriting, they use their knowledge from Tytos' letter, as well as their knowledge of Jon's loyalty to Stannis and Winterfell, to write a letter that they know will test Jon's loyalty, as well as making him mad, hopefully getting Jon to move south of the Wall to take part in the affairs of the realm. Then they deliver the letter unopened because they wrote and sealed it themselves, at which point Jon ponders the situation with Tormund for 2 hours, giving the conspirators enough time to prepare the rest of this assassination. Then Jon announces the movement to Winterfell in a public forum, giving the conspirators all they need to justifiably murder their Lord Commander. Boom, there you have it, my personal theory into the Pink Letter's author. I know there is some stretching you have to do to make it all fit. You might think it's unlikely that Tytos would learn about Mance and the Spear Wives, or that it could be a huge jump in logic to assume that Tytos and his party would send a letter north, but I think that it perfectly explains a lot of problems with the Pink Letter itself. It also explains why Tytos is in the story at all. I mean, yeah, the Iron Bank is a very important piece of the world of the Song of Ice and Fire, but having Tytos arrive at Stannis' camp for the entirety of one single chapter just to return back seems a little bit out of place and just kind of weird. If you think that Wyman or Ramsey wrote the letter, or if you think that it was Mance or Stannis, there are a lot of justifiable reasons to point in that direction. But I really hope you take the time to consider my own theory. Everyone, leave your remarks down in the comment section to show how much I clearly don't know, because I probably messed up at some point. Please like and subscribe. Also, special thank you to Preston Jacobs. His video series on the assassination of Jon Snow really helped me organize my thoughts when making this video. Thank you for watching, and join me next time on The Nerdscape.